our next speaker, Cherry Rose Tan. So, she's a performance and leadership coach. And these are her three. I need y'all to simmer down, simmer down. Cherry Rose is coming up. Cherry Rose is coming up. Cherry Rose, she dances in random places and public places. This would be one. There you go, girl. There you go. Shake what your mama gave you. All right. And she competed in esports back in grade school. And she had a life-changing moment while traveling, while she was in Greece, to see the original statue of Athena. She was wearing the, I don't know what this word is, aegis? Aegis?
Yeah, aegis.
Aegis, yeah, see, fancy words. Aegis of snakes, and she was over 25 years old. That's fascinating. You're gonna have to talk about the snakes. So welcome, Cherry Rose.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me. It's such an honor to be here. And today I am so grateful to be here to share a story that is something that I've really lived with all my life. As mentioned before from the intro, I am a fifth-generation entrepreneur. So 250 years of entrepreneurship running through my family. And today I really want to share the other side, the unspoken stories that we might not often hear about in entrepreneurship. So in my family, there are 8 founders. And out of those 8 founders, 3 of them have passed from burnout. And it's a story that we, hear in the startup world, people burning out, people working long hours. And I kind of want to share with you just the things that I've learned about my own fuck up with my first startup and what it means to really lead in an extraordinary way in terms of the cultures that we create and the people that we support. So my journey with really burnout and this whole story really started off in in age 10. And at age 10, I was in a family where there was a lot of struggle. We had come to Canada with literally nothing. When my parents had come here, we had to start literally from scratch. And I remember my dad working 100 hours a week to make ends meet. And we didn't even have furniture in the apartment. And so I learned from really early on, a lot of the motto was about, it's about working hard, making sure that you have to hustle, you have to grind. If you work hard enough, you're going to succeed. And during this time, growing up in this environment where we were, poor, living in poverty, I started getting bullied at age 10. And this became the start of a 10-year struggle with depression. It was the start of, 6 years of not having any friends, not having anyone to talk to, of feeling very lonely because, I was a child growing up in this entrepreneur family and felt like I didn't really have things that I could share with people or things that I could relate to. And I remember at that time, I didn't know what to do with all of these feelings. I felt really ashamed. And I went up to my grade 4 teacher and I asked this teacher for help. And this teacher told my parents, it's like, what, I can't help your kid. I actually think there's something wrong with your kid. Maybe your kid's got autism and that, she needs to be checked out by a psychologist. And what that was for me was that was the start of learning something different, which is what I became really ashamed of feeling. I became really ashamed of sharing weakness, of crying, of asking for help. And so you can imagine growing in an entrepreneur family where, dinner conversations were about what company are you going to build? How are you going to change the world? That was the way I approached everything. I filled the hole where I didn't want to feel feelings, and I filled it with work. I filled it with accomplishments. I got my master's degree in psych and education, got a psych award from U of T. Later on, I decided I wanted to go into education, so I represented Canada in education. I had a consultancy for 7 years, catering to a lot of the millionaire families that live here. And where this all culminated is it culminated into my first startup called ThoughtKite. And when I was at ThoughtKite, this is really the example of who I was as a leader, where I was just coming from a place of just pure intellect. There wasn't, to be really frank with you, there wasn't a lot of humanity and empathy in the way that I led, because by the time that I got there, it was all about the hustle. It was all about making it work, about optimizing, about pushing my team harder for all the things that we need to do. And so ThoughtKite was my first startup, and it was a mobile development school that was grounded in design thinking. And it was quite innovative for its time. We were housed at Highline VC. It was such an exciting time because we were doing all these community events. We were doing really great things in the education space. We even did these amazing collaborations with different people, with OCAD, with industry leaders, and had all this amazing stuff. And then that's when I realized all of my patterns, all of the stuff that I hadn't resolved for 15 years, all that stuff started to come out, and it, to be quite frank, it tore apart my team. And it was really unintentional. I remember for me, we were one day, this is 11 p.m. at night at Highline VC, and I'm sitting with my leadership team. There's 4 of us. And my 3 other leaders are there, and they're telling me, all of them in the same week have ended their relationships with their significant others because they decided that they just didn't have time to have a relationship. And I remember hearing that, and I was so shocked. And I was like, wow, what kind of founder am I? What kind of leader am I when my team doesn't feel comfortable enough to have their own personal life? What kind of leader am I when my whole team is not taking care of themselves? And the pinnacle for me was, to be really frank, a near-death experience. I sat one day in a clinic with a doctor, thought I was there for a routine checkup, and we just did some tests. And when I came back the next time, they sat me down and they said, there's a lot of things here that are really wrong with your body. And at the time, I was already 6 years of working 100 hours a week, and symptoms I was getting, really frankly, I wasn't sleeping at night. I was just tired and cranky and just burned out all the time. It was hard for me to think. I was getting heart palpitations all the time, and I was pretty young, so that was really irregular. I had a cough bronchitis that lasted for 8 months, and the really disheartening part was I had even organ damage. I had worked myself so hard and had so much pride, didn't want to ask for help, didn't want to tell my team, that it damaged my body, and I nearly killed myself. And that's really the reality of it, is that, for entrepreneurs and maybe for founders, sometimes we don't want to tell this story because, there's this public image, and we want to have this morale, and we want to make sure that the team is okay. But this is sometimes the part of it. So where this led me to is that I realized, wow, there is something that I do not understand about life. There is something that I do not understand about leadership, and I need to find this out if I'm committed to be an entrepreneur for the rest of my life. Because it is entirely unacceptable for any entrepreneur to feel like they have to literally work themselves to death to make a business work. And so where this led me, and these are actual photos from my travels, I traveled around the world. And I traveled around the world to search for the top performance coaches in the world, and also for spiritual leaders to really understand, is there a better way to live? Is there a better way where I can still be in my power and also live a really balanced life? So this took me to New York, LA, Athens, Rome, Halifax, Shanghai. And the one that I want to share with you that really touched me was the one where I went to Bali. And I went to Bali in a coaching retreat with a bunch of entrepreneurs. And it was so powerful because I remember we booked a private villa out by the mountains. And it was so private. You had to drive 2 hours out, and there were not even street signs. And there were no locals living there. And it was so, so quiet. And I remember for 7 days, I took all my bedding and I slept outside, and I slept underneath the stars, and I woke up to the sunrise. And I remember it was such a profound experience because I cried for 3 hours because that was the first time, the first moment that I had since grade 10 where I allowed myself to feel. It was the first time that I didn't have the opportunity for distraction. I couldn't do work. I didn't have my technology. I didn't have my friends to distract me in all those parties. And it was the first time I allowed myself to feel. And I share this story because what touched me even more was the fact that when I shared this, all the entrepreneurs that I went to this retreat with, when I cried for those 3 hours, they held me and they didn't judge. And they said, "We understand, we get you, and we have your back." And so where this takes me now, and something that I'm so inspired every single day, is I'm really on a mission to change the way that we do business. And like the way that my brother, before his passing days, changed the way of crypto, changed the way that we did finance in his last 5 years, I hope to change the way that we do business. And what I see for us and what I see for community is like, what would the startup culture, what would entrepreneurship be like if we were honest with each other? What would it be like to know that, hey, if I'm struggling, if I have a problem, or even if I just need help, that it's okay to ask? And it's been really, really beautiful. In the months since my brother's death, I've been speaking on stages to talk about mental health. And to be really honest with you, it's taken a lot of courage because this is a very personal story for me. But the response that I've gotten has been so, so beautiful. 2 months ago, I spoke at the blockchain economic event about coming together as a family. And it was so funny. I was speaking in front of 500 people, and I did this speech, and it was dead silent after. And I was like, oh God, did I fuck up? Like, nobody's clapping. Like, what happened? And here's the funny thing. So, you know what? Like, maybe it took some time for people to absorb the message, but I had people come and approach me at the after party, 10 different founders who approached me, who came and held my hands or looked me in the eye, and they said, hey, I want to be part of this movement. Hey, I've experienced the same thing that you and your brother did, and I thank you for having the courage to share what you share. And it's been the most beautiful experience, most beautiful movement, because right now I'm in the midst of creating a collaborative mental health platform. And it's been so encouraging because there's been VC firms, law firms, startup founders, event planners who've come to be part of this cause. And I've even had over 50 different founders who've come to talk to me privately to share with me their stories so that I could get context for how we can support each other as a family. And so where this takes me right now, which I'm so excited about, is I hope that we can really come together to share stories and to really know that if you're feeling something, whether it's maybe anger or it's sadness or it's doubt or whatever it is, I'm pretty sure that every single person in this room has felt it too, and that you're not alone. And if we can come together to realize that our feelings are what bring people together. Our feelings are what inspire people to create the startups to begin with, to create the movement, then we can do anything as a family. So thank you so much for listening. I hope we can take a step.
Wow, Cherry Rose, that was a very touching story. With the high-profile deaths of Kate Spade and Anthony Bourdain, as entrepreneurs, we really need to, if you're an entrepreneur, it's a very lonely life. But coming to events like this is what, helps get you out of your shell. Like, it wasn't until I came and did until I spoke last month that I was like, wow, there's people like me too. So I encourage you to not only, there's these memes that are like, oh, check on your strong friend. Check on all your friends. Because, the happy one, the depressed one, the sad one, the strong one, check on everyone. Because sometimes all it takes is that one phone call, that one text to say, hey, are you okay? How are you doing? And, especially as a first generation immigrant, I'm sure a lot of you are, where it's a shame to feel. Depression, if you've never experienced it, I wouldn't wish it on my worst enemy. It's the worst thing in the world. I've been suicidal. I've been depressed, and it was only because someone called me, actually it was my mom, who told me, if you don't smarten the fuck up, I will disown you. And literally, that's what woke me up out of that fog. So, I'm gonna open myself up. If any of you are going through something and need to talk to someone, you can reach out to me. You can reach out to any of the founders here at Fuckup Nights. Anyone, just reach out to somebody. You don't have to go through this alone, okay? Does anyone have any questions for Cherry Rose?
Hi, thank you for sharing your story. One thing I'm just wondering is, what made you continue to pursue entrepreneurship after seeing the struggles your parents went through?
I think for me, the way that I frame entrepreneurship's about possibility. Like something that I tell a lot of the people that I talk to. So I coach founders and entrepreneurs on optimal performance. And my belief in why I have so much respect for the startup community is I've literally seen the startup community innovate every single industry. My brother 4 years ago started doing the fight for crypto. And if you've been following crypto, you know that 4 years ago, banks were not even allowing these people to have accounts, right? And they had to deal with regulation and government. And what I see entrepreneurship is that if you channel it in the right way, entrepreneurship can be a platform. It can be a way to really serve people. And I've lived a lot of pain, to be really frank with you. I guess 14 years dealing with mental health. And the thing that I notice with entrepreneurship is that especially if you check in and you feel and you ask yourself what's really important to you, I often find that it's like the thing that you end up birthing from entrepreneurship is such a direct reflection of the experiences you lived, and you're the exact person for it. So, yeah, thank you for asking that.
Are there any other questions for Cherry Rose? Yes, Chris.
What's one thing that everyone here tonight could do tonight when they go home or tomorrow by the end of the day to help you with your mission?
Oh, thank you for asking. Honestly, I think one thing that I would ask is if you know of any founders, any stars, people who you feel like would be allies in this mission, I would really appreciate introductions. And if you know of any other events that would be good to speak at, that would be amazing. Because, as I said before, I feel really nervous sharing the story. It feels still very tender for me, to be honest with you. But my hope is, if my story's out there, eventually I hope more people will come out and speak too. Thank you for asking.
Thank you. We have another question right here.
Hi. One of the most powerful parts of what you talked about today was when you were talking about your team, and you said yourself that you noticed that they were sacrificing their personal life and their mental health. And I found that really powerful because the surprise in that was that it didn't come from them to push back on you as the leader. It actually came from you to reflect on maybe how you were leading or just how the whole company was going. So I have a two-part question, I guess. The first is just, how did you come to that realization, and was it more driven by yourself and what you saw in yourself and how you were struggling, or what you saw in others? And then second, did you do anything about it with your team, and if so, what was their reaction?
Oh, those are great questions. So at the time, the way that I realized it was just I noticed that this was like a pattern in my startup. That's not actually how we first started. When we first came together, it was brilliant minds wanting to change education, wanting to give skills, like tech skills to people to see if we can empower their entrepreneurial ideas. And it was just something that really stood out to me because I'm like, okay, this is really peculiar. Like, it's one thing for one breakup, but like 3 breakups in a week. And also the fact that we literally were staying there. Like, we had this meeting at 11 p.m. at night. And so, something that, I've reflected upon is like, well, if you're the leader, and this is something I tell a lot of people, is that even though, you're doing your own thing, right? You think you want to hustle, you think you want to grind, people still observe you, people still look at you. And so even though I never told my team, like, hey guys, like, you're gonna break up with all your your girlfriends and your boyfriends, I never said that. But because they saw the way that I led, immediately, like, unsaid, there was like almost this expectation, like, oh, she's staying until midnight at the office, I guess I need to stay until midnight too, because that's the untold expectation. Yeah. Thank you so much for asking.
We have here we go.
Bear with me for a second. I went through something similar working for a company, and it was driven, my exhaustion and whatever was driven by the bottom line and the speed at what they wanted to produce their product. So I'm just wondering, how do you battle that if you ever encounter that?
Right. Yeah, thank you for asking. I mean, one of the things that I think we're addressing right now, which is why I've been calling it like this comprehensive platform, is that I really feel part of this change has to be cultural. Because what I've noticed is that, I mean, I've been coaching founders for years now, and it's like, coach founders, they get the mindset, they have to do wellness, they're trying to implement the best they can, and then they come back to a world where it's like, oh man, like, we accepted VC money, so this, they're asking stuff for next quarter. And so that's why now we've been opening up the dialogue to VCs. It's like, hey, and this is something that I tell to a lot of them. It's like, look, I know that you were founders once. And not only that, like, the statistics are that like 35% of all startups fail because of the state of the founder. So it also makes business sense that it's like, if there's problems happening, if there needs to be more support coming from, let's say, the VCs, or let's say if it's board of directors, board of advisors, then, I hope that this will be something where it's like an honest dialogue of like, reminding ourselves what our strengths are, because I think founders, if you're a founder and you've created a startup, you're probably pretty brilliant at what you do. You probably have come in with a very particular passion, a very particular intellect. And it's about really going back to, let's say, VCs, going back to other people, and just saying like, hey, look, these are our strengths. These are all the really great things that we can still put in value, but we can't do this alone. Can you provide the other part? Can we have a win-win? So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Cherry Rose. That was great.
So much.
Thank you.